Let me start off by saying my choosing to come to the podium on the right is by no means descriptive of my standing in terms of ideology or orientation. I had wanted to stand there, but I thought it would be best to come and stand here like everyone else. Not that I'm a right-winger by any chance. This thing of a title president, there is a country, Sipho, in Africa, where the president of the country declared that the title of president can only be used by the head of state and no one else. And seemingly it was either a decree or a law that was passed, and as a result, every other position is referred to as chairman or whatever. No one is referred to as president other than the president of their republic. Now you are tempting me to go in that direction. We are very pleased that we live in a democracy where we will never go in that direction. So I'm happy to call you President Pichana, and everyone else who's a president, I'll also call you president. Whether you want to be called excellency or honorable doesn't really matter to me. It's all the same thing. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I know that there are quite a number of business leaders from various organizations and associations. I'm rather glad to be here with you together under the BUSA umbrella. Earlier this morning, we went to bury Ndate Maponya. It looked a bit sad, but at the same time, it was a celebration of his life. The real cherry on top for me was having Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was a friend to Richard Maponya, and Tate Sem Motswenyane, who was a friend to Richard Maponya for 65 years. So it was wonderful to hear their stories and their tributes to their peer and their departed colleague. So it was a good start to the morning, and it's also going to be a very good end for me being here with you. So I really welcome this opportunity. When the funeral was announced, I thought that it would elbow me out of this opportunity, but I'm glad you were able to recalibrate your program to enable me to come and spend a few moments with you. Your Indaba or dialogue is happening at a time when we are facing a rather serious challenge in our economy, in our country, a time of economic crisis. And as we all know, our economy is not growing, and unemployment is on the rise, and businesses are struggling. Demand is low, and a number of businesses are shedding jobs. And this morning we woke up to Masmat having to close down 34 or so of their stores and shedding 1,500 or so jobs. And investor confidence is also on the decline. It keeps leveling out, but it has been declining for quite a while. And you're coming here together under the theme, activating actual outcomes. It's quite heartwarming and encouraging to us who are in government, because we do not have the luxury of time, and we do not also have the luxury to lament. And I've been informed that you spent the better part of the day not lamenting, not criticizing, but focusing on real outcomes, actual outcomes, and activating those outcomes. When I heard that, I immediately said to myself, well, possibly I will emerge out of here with the first draft of the State of the Nation address. Now, I say this advisedly because there is a young girl, my colleagues will remind me, a young girl, I think she's about 12 or 14 or somewhere there. She's written to the presidency, and she has said that she wants to help the president in the drafting of the State of the Nation address. So we have drafted her in. She's going to get involved in the drafting of the State of the Nation address. And as you may know, the State of the Nation address is not one person's task. It's a task that's undertaken by a number of people. So you are going to be in good company. This young girl is going to be in the president's sitting area when we deliver the State of the Nation address, and we'll point her out that she was one of the drafters because she wants to come with a number of ideas. She wants to suggest a number of things. She did not even say, I want to make suggestions. She said, I want to be part of the drafters of the State of the Nation address. So I was told that there are about 400 of you here. So I'm quite happy to get up to 400 drafts before we deliver the State of the Nation address. But more seriously, I'm hoping that out of the thoughts and the proposals and some of those that I've seen on the board, although I couldn't write all of the things that were being said very quickly because they were fleeting very fast, some of the things are the type of things that I would like to see getting into the State of the Nation address. So I really welcome, Sipho, I really welcome this opportunity of meeting people who are not lamenters, people who are not armchair critics, but people who are actually saying, we need to act together because we are in this together. And we are in this, all of us, myself and yourself, we are together in all this, and let us find solutions. So I'm glad to see that you are solutions-oriented, because the next decade is a crucial one for our country, and you could say for the world as well, seeing with what is happening around the world with, bombs going all over and threats of war happening and also on our continent. We are entering what I see as the last decade towards the implementation of the National Development Plan Vision 2030. We have exactly 10 years to have this plan implemented. It is a window that I think we should exploit. We've been beating ourselves to a pulp in the past few years since we adopted the plan by saying we are not going to make it, but I think we can utilize this decade to try and implement the majority of the proposals that are in that plan. And globally, we also have another challenge to accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Plans, the 17 goals that are set out for the globe for us to try and achieve. And a number of them are achievable. We are slightly behind, and so we all have an opportunity to do so. At the same time, we as Africans have to be looking at Agenda 2063. Much as it may sound very, very far, we need to start putting the seeds of the implementation of Agenda 2063. So we enter this new year and this new decade on our part, and I'm glad that it seems to be so on your part as well, determined to activate actual outcomes. You are actually ahead of the curve, and you are beginning to show us the leadership that we need, that we should focus on outcomes, rather than just continuing to talk about policies and policies and policies. It should now be what you've underpinned in all the groups that have reported here, implementation. If we are to do so in a sustainable manner, we will be able to revive our economy and to change the fortunes of our country. And we therefore have a great opportunity, all of us seated here, to change the course of the history of our nation and to change the course of fortune of our country. And all of us should see ourselves as active participants, not armchair critics. And we should be asking ourselves, what is it that we can do? And I'm glad that I'm seated here or in the presence of people who are oriented in that direction of saying, what is it that each one of us can do? And certainly, the report backs indicate that we're dealing here, and all of you are people who are action-oriented and want to make a contribution to make this country work. And I'm particularly pleased to have been briefed by Sipho and the other colleagues that beyond this dialogue or Indaba, you are going to be able to synthesize all the reports and come up with a more succinct report which is actionable, which we really appreciate, and that will be the type of report which I know Sipho and them will share with us, so that we begin to shape and mold what we need to be doing as the year goes on. And indeed, if we are to do all this in a more determined manner, we need to appreciate the essence of the challenges that we face in our economy. And we should be careful as we do so not to ascribe deep-seated structural issues to solutions which we think can resolve all these issues in a fleeting manner. We are confronting challenges in our economy that are deep-seated, problems that have emanated from the long past. One of the groups dealt with the structure of the economy, and in doing so, I'm sure that as you delve more and more into it, you will realize that that is where the real problem resides. I've always characterized our economy as a deformed economy. Deformed economy because it was structured in a way from an ownership point of view, management point of view, control point of view, and interest-serving point of view to serve just a few people. And the ownership thereof spoke to that, and also to exclude a number of people. And if we are going to build an inclusive economy, we therefore need to restructure our economy, because the current state of our economy is not well aligned with where we want to go. And the sooner we're able to settle down and begin to deal with that reality, the better. Because if we don't, we could be just tinkering just on the periphery of the problem without addressing the real source of the problem. We therefore need to do quite a lot of introspection about our economy, and it is important that the understanding of our economy should be broad-based. It should also include the ordinary citizens of our country, to understand how our economy functions, what the structure of the economy is, and should also understand what we mean when we say South Africa is a middle-income economy without a significant middle class. And our experience is not typical to our peer income group, because we often compare ourselves with a number of countries. But when you actually look deeper and deeper, you'll find that our experience and our history is very different from theirs. But be that as it may, we have challenges that we have to address, and we have to address them frontally. In your opening address, President Sipho Pitjana, you referred to decisiveness, that we've got to be decisive. We've got to also be clear about what we need to see done, the reforms and the interventions that we need to embark upon. And you posed the question, does the President support the reforms that have been suggested? And the answer is yes. And in fact, the President has been ahead of the curve when it comes to some of those reforms, because I've been insisting that we do need to reform, embark on serious reforms if we are going to be an investor-friendly country. We need, and in many ways it is also for that reason that I've opted to have a monthly meeting with business, with labor, and community to discuss a number of the reforms that need to be embarked upon. I do believe that we need to embark on policy choices and interventions that will support higher growth, that will also support employment and attract investment, but also, more importantly, competitiveness of our economy. And if we can do that and embark on those reforms and interventions that can reposition our country, we are well positioned. And may I credit the business community for having been willing to engage with us to arrive at agreement and consensus on the reforms that need to be embarked upon. And many of the reforms that we have embarked upon, some have been initiated or articulated by the business community. And in the main, we have agreed that, yes, we do need to embark on those. And you will find that this administration is very open, very engaging with the business community. And many of you know that we all have an open door policy, from myself as President of the Republic to the various ministers who deal with economic matters. We have an open door policy, and we say we are prepared to engage. And this we do to live up to what one of your groups said we should do, to build a social compact. I think it was a group that dealt with enabling state capacity, to build a social compact. And this I don't do flippantly, because it was a clear instruction from the governing party that I lead, which said that grow the economy, but in doing so, go out and build social compacts with key role players in the economy. And that opened the way for us to be able to be willing even to engage with business on a variety of issues, and to be open to listening to business. And the one thing that I will say is that we are open to listening to the ideas that business has to put forward. And where we agree, we will immediately say, let us go ahead and do this together. Where we disagree, it will be on clearly stated principled issues where we say, let's draw the line, we don't agree on this, but let's continue working together. So you have a government that is willing, prepared, able to work with you as the private sector, and that is why we hold organizations such as BUSA very, very close to our heart, because we know that you've got a lot of ideas to put on the table. Hence, I invite you to do your initial draft of the State of the Nation address. How do you like that? How do you like that? And on our part, there are obviously quite a number of things that we have to do. we have to embark on those interventions that we need to embark upon to ensure that there's policy certainty. One of the things that you did say very clearly to us right at the onset is that there is policy uncertainty and policy inconsistency. And what we have sought to do is precisely to address this gap that existed. And we've kept you informed on an ongoing basis about the steps that we continue to take. And I'd like to say that where we falter, where you see that we're moving a bit too slow, as some of you believe we are, and I know in what areas you believe we are moving slowly, please raise the issue. On our part, we will make sure that we do ensure there's policy certainty, as you have asked, and that the policy must focus on ensuring that we have a very good macroeconomic policy and obviously very good fiscal policy that is not going to put us as a nation at risk. And a number of you have been concerned about government expenditure and how we had to be moved and sort of compelled into providing capital to some of our state-owned enterprises. You have feared that that is going to put us into a fiscal risk of the sort that we will never be able to recover from. And those are the types of conversations that we are prepared to have with you. On the microeconomic policy side, we've also said that we are going to do a number of things to ensure that we support higher growth by ensuring that there is a well-regulated, efficient business environment that will be able to encourage investment, encourage innovation, and also encourage the creation of new businesses. We need, obviously, to seize the opportunities that are out there, but also to assist you and to support some of you as our businesses, as you conduct your businesses, because in the end you are our customers. You are taxpayers, and the customer comes first, and we need to do right by ensuring that we create a very conducive environment for you to conduct your business. The opportunities, there are a plethora of opportunities. And there are conversations that I would like to have with you as businesses. And Sipho, maybe we should set this aside for another day. South Africa is going to become the chair of the African Union this year. And there is the issue of implementing, and this is the opportunity I wanted to talk to, implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Now, it opens up vast opportunities for our country, and we are the most industrialized country on the continent. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia was here 2 days ago, and he was bemoaning the fact that he sees the rest of the continent continuing to go outside the African continent to procure goods that they can get, and machinery and everything else, including services, that they can easily procure from South Africa, the most industrialized country on the continent. He was bemoaning that, and he was saying, President, we need to turn this around so that we trade with ourselves. And this, colleagues, I believe, is a great opportunity that awaits our businesses. But it is not an opportunity without risk. A number of our companies that operate on the African continent are facing quite a lot of challenges. Challenges that you also said you were facing here with policy uncertainty. But out there on the African continent, in a number of countries, it just gets worse. There's a lot of policy uncertainty and policy inconsistency. And we have said, I've said to Minister Patel, we should have a dialogue with our companies that are operating in the rest of the African continent so that we can discuss these issues and find a way of addressing them so that you are able, as our companies, to operate as effectively as you possibly can. Because the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is a continental agreement that we need to harness. We need to look at the opportunities and ensure that we do indeed get South African companies to succeed in the rest of the continent. We do need to also support you as we go around the continent. I've often said that when we go visiting, either on state visits or whatever, I would like to see a strong business delegation coming from South Africa, accompanying us so that we can open channels, pathways, and great business opportunities for that what you can get out there. Our government is therefore committed to giving as much support and assistance to our companies. In fact, we want to create as many national champions as we possibly can, because that's what other countries do. As we go around the world visiting them, we see they support their companies in a very strong way, and that's precisely what I would like to see us doing as well. You know, of course, we are focusing on an investment drive, and I was glad to see that in some of the reports, which I will comment on in a little while, there was a question of crowding in the private sector to invest more and more. We've been rather successful in the two investment conferences that we have held the previous year and last year, which reflected a renewed confidence in our country and commitment by investors. Now, that needs to be matched much more vigorously by South African investors themselves, because as we interface with foreign investors, they say, we want to see what South African companies themselves are doing in terms of investing in your economy. So the call that I'd like to make to you as businesses is that we would like to see an uptick on investment commitment by all of you as businesses in the economy of our country. You have an open door to come raise with us some of the problems and challenges that you may face. And you have done so. You have raised a number of challenges that you have where we may not be creating a conducive environment for investment. You have raised those and we are addressing them. And let me add quickly on this point that we are addressing them in quite a systematic manner. Every Monday of every month, first Monday of every month, we meet with SIPO and them, and we discuss these matters. And sometimes the discussions get quite heated, and some of your representatives get heated under the collar. And I see that maybe they don't get enough heat or cooling in the boardrooms, and they come and take it out on us when we meet them. And they almost get to a point of banging the tables when we meet them. But we meet them as our compatriots with a spirit of finding solutions to problems, knowing that all of us have to put our country first. So on that investment drive score, we have done relatively well. Having put out a target of 1.2 trillion rand, we have almost achieved half of that. We now need in the next 3 years to go way above the 1.2 trillion, but we also want to see a greater participation by South African businesses. We do this because we've got the challenge of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, which we've got to address in the most vigorous way. And in this regard, we have been heartened by having the private sector as our partner through a number of job creation and youth job entry preparatory interventions, We've been cooperating with many of your companies that have been supportive through the Harambee program, through the YES program, and through a number of others. And this initiative is being driven at the President's office level, and we want this Presidential Youth Initiative to be comprehensive, to be successful. It is an ambitious one, but we do want to get as many young people into that program. And I'd like you, as companies, to participate. Last year, we saw flagging participation by companies in these various initiatives. And some of those who are running the initiative said, President, we'd like you to pick up the phone and phone some of the companies. Now we've got more than 1 million companies in South Africa who could never have been able to do so. So on this platform, I therefore need to call on all of you as companies, members of BUSA and members of the BBC and members of a number of SACI and a number of other organizations that are here, that do encourage your respective companies to participate in this, because we want to ensure that we give our young people a very, very strong offering. We will be addressing this once again at the State of the Nation address, because we believe that we will be able to get more and more traction in doing all this. You focus on skills in a number of the groups that we're reporting back, and skills are vital. The reform of our education system is underway, and at the basic education level, we're getting it started at the school level, introducing a number of subjects of a technically oriented nature to ensure that young people do take them up. And we are finding a great deal of good interest by young people and their parents, knowing that education is a long-term project that any nation can ever undertake. We are beginning to make progress. And sometimes we beat ourselves by criticizing our education system. And of course, where we are making mistakes, we should be criticized, but it is beginning to bear fruit. If anybody analyzed the matric results of last year, you will have noticed that we're beginning now. The shadow of apartheid education is beginning to recede more and more, because the great results are now coming from those schools, those areas which Hendrik Verwoerd did not want to see good educational outcomes coming from. They are coming from township schools, and they are also coming from rural schools. And so therefore, we are placing a lot of emphasis on that. And of course, the good thing is that government is not doing all this alone. The outcomes that we are having in our education is also being achieved through the participation and the partnership with the private sector. And therefore, as a private sector, you are heavily invested in ensuring that our skills revolution does indeed end up bearing fruit. Progress is being made in developing a lot of legislative instruments. And we would like you to pay keen attention as the private sector to some of those. Some you may find they give you indigestion, and some you may find that you are able to find commonality of interest with government. And I say this advisedly. One of those is on the land question. This year, we are going to have to finalize the legislation and the constitutional construct on the land question. Now, this is where the business community can participate in a much more, I believe, proactive manner. One of the things that we've been asking for is the business community to come forward with solutions of resolving this centuries-old problem of land. I was in the Northern Cape just a few days ago and met a number of communities communities who told me how they were removed from the land that their forebears were removed from their land. And as they were removed, they were also, the water rights that they had along the Orange River were also taken away from them and were distributed to a number of white farmers. And if you look at that whole belt on both sides of the Orange River, you'll find that many of the farmers there who are running fairly successful agro-businesses because they've got the most important resource, which is water, they are successful. And many of the black people whose land was taken away from them are nowhere near being successful. Now, it requires a solution. And I would like to see, President Pichana, the business community taking this issue up rather more seriously. It's not an issue that we should say belongs to the government alone. The government must find a solution. In Zimbabwe, some of the business people will tell you that they were a bit too slow in coming forward with solutions that could have been very, very pragmatic in resolving the land question in Zimbabwe. They did not, in the end, realize what the land question, how serious it was. It is equally serious in our country, and we've got to address it. And we therefore say, let the business community come forward with proposals. One of those things that we've put out in legislation is a donations policy. Is it possible for the business community in our country to come forward and say, we actually have surplus land that we are not using, which we believe can be donated? There's a bill that we've put before the nation about precisely that. Is it possible for a group of farmers, for a number of people who own land to come forward? One of the companies that has come forward is Anglo-American, donated land in Rustenburg, and said, we don't need this land. We've been holding it and hoarding it for all these years. This land is much more needed for residential purposes. We're going to give it out so that we release the pressure on the municipality of Rustenburg to find land when we have land. And I believe that there could be a whole number of such opportunities throughout the country. What is a certainty is that the land question has to be addressed. As South Africa, we cannot run away from it. The people of our country want to see the land question addressed. The key issue for us is, are we going to be part of the solution, or are we going to be part of the problem? And I'd like to suggest that as the business community, let us also be part of the solution when it comes to the most important issue that is of greatest concern to the people of our country. And I forever think about the writings of Saul Plaatje on the land issue, but a few days ago, I came face to face with a descendant of one of those whose forebears' land was taken away, and who now says, I want to farm, and I want water rights. I want to farm along the Orange River, but I have no farm that I can farm on. So I propose that we should take this matter seriously. The other issues that you have raised, which I will address in a little while as well. The energy question is an important one for all of us. I was in the church service, and the priest who was the last to speak also was preaching about energy. And when he came to talk about Eskom, he said, oh, God bless us all. And that's precisely what we need. God bless us all. But in December, one of the things, President Pichana, that we came up with was to say, let us now embark on a new trajectory when it comes to energy. Precisely the issue that was reported on in the very first group, and I'll come to that. We embark on a new trajectory of allowing self-generation. And for the first time, we're now saying, let us have self-generation. Now, as we move forward, we're beginning to address all those policy issues that have introduced uncertainty, inconsistency. We are addressing them. We now opened up a new era in the history of our energy resource generation, if you like. A new era that says we now are embracing the fact that there are those companies, there are those even families or households that want to generate their own energy. This, for me, was brought more home because one day I got on the roof of my house, and as I looked and surveyed the other houses, I saw that my neighbor had a whole range of solar panels. His entire roof was just solar panels. Then later I asked him on the phone, I said, I see you've transformed your whole house, and it's a big house. You've transformed your whole house into a solar panel energy generator. He says, yes, I have. And I'm generating surplus energy. And he says, President, this is what I would finally want to get full permission for, to generate in a more effective way and be able to even sell to Eskom. That then made the penny drop for me. And I realized that as a nation, we cannot stop technology. We cannot stop the future from arriving, because the future is here. And what we need to do is to embrace that future. So we have arrived at that, and so government is moving ahead, addressing all those issues which you have raised, which a number of you have raised. And yes, we may be slow, but where we are slow, we say, keep raising the issue, get us to up the tempo so that we begin to move faster. Because in the end, we are really on the same side. We are on the same side, and today you confirm it more fully by saying activating actual outcomes. That means we are on the same side. When it comes to the spectrum, the issue of the spectrum was in limbo for a very long time. And I can say our culpa, our mistake, because we were indecisive. For many years we were indecisive. And there is still a wrinkle in all this, but we are going to solve it. We're indecisive, and technology kept on knocking at our door, saying we have arrived. We need spectrum. We need to inject growth and energy into this economy, release the spectrum. And we kept on delaying and delaying. But finally, we've now opened it all up, and we say ICASA should now do it. But the good thing is, as ICASA was going to be taking its own time and doing it forever and forever, we met in this first Monday of every month meeting, together with the business community and labor. We called ICASA and said, please come and explain to us why you cannot move faster. And we got them to crunch the dates and all that, and now we are going to have the spectrum released a little bit much earlier than they would have anticipated. And thank you very much to your urging on this regard. And on the immigration issue, a matter which you also raised quite strongly. You were saying that your companies want to bring in skills, rare skills in our nation, skills that could be transferred to South Africans, skills that could make your companies work a lot better and at a higher level, so that you are able to compete with your peers either here or internationally. And on that too, we move a bit slowly, but now that immigration reform has now been resolved, And we are now saying we are open to attracting skilled workers from elsewhere, and we want them to come to our country. If there are still problems, please raise them, because it is possible that when it comes to the real granular aspects of this, there could be problems, but come raise them with us. You've raised the issue of tourism. And of course, tourism, and I'll speak to it in a little while, is what I would call the flywheel of our economy. It can make our economy grow a lot faster, because we can create a lot more jobs in that regard. Now, we are doing quite a lot of work and trying to progress forward as much as we possibly can, and removing all the barriers that have been identified. And we are also dealing with issues such as revising port tariffs, container and automotive cargo dues, and going down to the technical issues like those, so that we are able to get to a higher level of growth. One of the other important things that we have done as a government, which many people have not really paid much attention to on our industrial policy side, is that we've now departed from a very broad and generalized just industrial policy. We've now said we want to have master plans. We want to have master plans that focus on every aspect of a particular sector, so that we're able to look at how that sector functions and how we can inject growth into that sector, and how we can remove the constraints, the barriers, and everything else in a particular sector. And Minister Patel has been working on master plans of the various sectors. Poultry, and you may think that, poultry is an insignificant sector. It is a huge sector. And we've come up with a master plan on poultry, a master plan on clothing and textile. Others are being crafted, and we are going to have a variety of master plans, because our job is to get all stakeholders in various industries to work with us to find ways of unlocking growth that can be had. I mean, I forever remember traveling to Japan with grape growers. Grape growers traveled with us to Japan, and it's a matter that, in a way, a president will never be able to find space to attend to. But our grape growers were saying, President, we want you to talk to the Prime Minister of Japan. In the agro industry, we're having serious challenges. We are now growing seedless grapes. They want seedless grapes, but there is a regulation that prevents us from bringing our seedless grapes to Japan. And we would like our government to support us and to give us the assistance we need so that we can bring seedless grapes to Japan. So I'm trying to demonstrate the level of attention that we are bringing to bear to support our business people in a variety of sectors. And the master plans that we are crafting are doing precisely that, so that not only the minister, but the officials and everyone else, and to some extent including the president, should fully understand how a sector functions and what makes a particular sector move and shake. And that is what our master plans are beginning to do. I'm not going to speak long about ESCOM, because Minister Pravin Gordhan was here and he will have dealt with it in the groups that you had. Safe to say, if there is any challenge that our country faces, as I've said ad nauseum, and all of you have said exactly the same, it is ESCOM. With our generation fleet that is old and needs a lot of maintenance and attention. We are paying continuous attention to it, and one of the things we have to do, obviously, is to streamline the leadership, both at the oversight level, in Eskom itself, at the board, as well as at the management level. And we are glad that we now have a CEO who's paying attention to all the challenges that we are now facing, and will be able to move forward. And we've released a number of documents, roadmaps on this, and a special paper on this Eskom issue, and we will be addressing all the challenges in the war room, as well as at the board and management level with Eskom. And we will make sure that we encourage and support management to focus on improving efficiency and also have a good measure of transparency in dealing with all these matters that we are facing. So Eskom, which is a major issue for you as key players, is going to be addressed, and we will address it to good effect. The same thing goes for SAA, which has also been a major challenge for us. At one point, it could have gone into liquidation. It is now in business rescue, and even though it is still vulnerable, we believe that it can be repositioned to go forward. Now, some of the issues that you touched on have to deal with the capability of the state. One of the biggest challenges that we face today in the Republic is just the capability and the capacity of the state. Over years, the capability of the state has actually diminished. It's diminished for a whole host of reasons. And one of those is how a number of key people who occupy key positions had much shorter tenures, like directors general. This Institute of Race Relations once did a study which showed that the tenure of, on average, of a director general in the South African state is no more than like 23 or 24 months, if not maybe 30. But if you can begin to think about that, of a CEO in a company where almost every 3 years you change a CEO, you will know that your company is not going to be operating at the best level. So capability of our government is a serious challenge. When I addressed the country in the State of the Nation address last year, I highlighted it of the 7 priorities. I highlighted the state, the capability of the state as number 6. And later I realized that actually I should have highlighted it as number 1, because that is the biggest challenge that we face. And it impacts on a point that you have addressed, which is implementation, which I will come to. Number of other issues so that you can see how busy this government has been. Number of the other issues has been how to bring about stability in state institutions, to restore stability in SARS. You know very well how SARS had been targeted and weakened. And we have worked very hard to restore, and the process is still underway, to ensure that SARS is able to reach that level once again of being a most effective state entity. We're by no means not yet there, but we are on the way. And this is some of the things that we've been doing correctly as we reposition our government. The other one is the National Prosecuting Agency. You've been reading all over in the media about how that one too was targeted during the state capture process, and that too is being rebuilt, and the criminal justice system also faces serious challenges, but we are in the process of repositioning that as well. And many of you have often said, well, but President, you are so ineffective because we are not, and when I ask you, why do you say that? They say, we haven't seen anybody who's done wrong being arrested. People are not in orange overalls and all that. And my retort is now, the day you have a president who is able to pinpoint people who should be arrested and have them arrested, charged, and sent to prison, that is the day you should really be worried, because it means that we now have a dictatorship. Now, we are strengthening institutions, and we want those institutions to do their work without any fear or favor or prejudice. And we are putting people who are capable, who are independent in those institutions, so that they can do their work and comply with the precepts of our Constitution. The PIC Commission has completed its work, and we are going through that report, and we will be coming out to the nation shortly on that, and the Zondo Commission on State Capture goes on. So all these processes are leading us to a point where we would like to be. We are by no means not yet there. But as I was saying right at the beginning, we are in this together. Let us walk this route together so that we reposition our country, strengthen our institutions, rebuild our economy, so that we are then able to put South Africa on a much firmer footing. We will obviously be able to do all this by activating actual outcomes which you have spoken so eloquently about today. Now, coming to some of the issues that were raised in your report back. The first one was about energy, which I have addressed to some extent, that energy is as much an economic as a social justice issue, which I agree with completely, and what needs to be done. You have suggested that in the end, a long-term energy plan has to be put in place, and it must be in the presidency. I hear you. There are quite a number of proposals now that are out there. Some of them are take energy, take ESCOM and put it into the energy department. Some of them are saying, no, leave it where it is. Now you are now saying have an energy plan and let's have it in the presidency. Well, you will soon be saying the president must now become the minister of ESCOM. And I agree with you that increase technical capacity at the ESCOM level, I could not agree more. That is precisely one of the key challenges that we are facing today. In the past, we used to have highly experienced, underline, highly experienced as well as technically well-trained people. And many of those are no longer there. We've got people in ESCOM now who are trying to do the best that they can, and they face enormous challenges because of the age of our fleet. You immediately propose, I think it's my sister who was saying so here, that we should reduce political interference. If we reduce political interference and decentralize, you believe that, yes, we will have arrived at a situation where we can possibly have the problems resolved. The governing parties conference, in looking at the state-owned enterprises, came up with a resolution which many people have not been taking care to look at closely, SIPO. It said, reposition the state-owned enterprises and reduce and eliminate interference. What that meant is that let us allow our state-owned enterprises to operate effectively without undue political interference. Decentralization that I think you're talking about is the restructuring process that we have envisaged and we want to embark upon, we are embarking upon in ESCOM. And of course, you're talking also about you need a commission on climate change. Our Ministry of Environmental Affairs through Minister Barbara Creasy is on top of all this. They are distinguishing themselves extremely well internationally, and obviously as South Africans, we need to up our own game when it comes to be more and more aware of climate change. This is one of the issues that a number of colleagues have said we need to get the continent to focus on, because the continent is bearing the brunt of climate damage that have been done elsewhere. And we therefore, you say, need a definitive plan, which we shall have, and that we should expedite the issuing of licenses for renewable energy. That is underway. I promise you, we are going to be issuing those licenses for the next lot that needs to be issued, because we have an energy deficit and we need to close that gap. You are suggesting that we need to unlock hydrogen. Yes, that is one of the alternatives or the sources of energy that we want to up our attention on. You dealt, I think it was Omar who dealt with the capable state. Focus on good governance, integrity, ethical leadership, and be decisive. Focus on execution and bring in the private sector and work with the private sector. And we must get the private sector to invest with heart and promote more PPPs. I could not agree more. We need to be doing all that. We want the private sector to work with us, and we are open for business as a government in as far as having private partnerships and public partnerships with the private sector. And in this regard, I'm one who has always said, let us be open to unsolicited proposals as well from the private sector. Let the private sector feel free that they can come to us with unsolicited proposals on a variety of things. You say that we must shift the attitude of civil servants. This is precisely the point I was trying to make earlier, that the capability of the state has diminished, and we do need a new ethos, a revamped and reinvigorated ethos among civil servants, so that they can, in a way, recommit themselves and put the interests of the people first. Minister DeLille was talking yesterday about the number of civil servants who are doing business with the state. And that is one of the most unethical things that a civil servant can do. And we've been talking about this over and over again. And this time around, those that we find getting into business and doing business with the state, they will face the consequences without any doubt, because we cannot have civil servants being both players and regulators and executors at the same time. It just doesn't work. On SOEs, you want to know and show that there's a policy certainty. Yes, we're ensuring that there should be more and more policy certainty, and we are going to be able to arrive at that when we have our SOE Council, which we are going to finalize soon. When the Policy Council is inaugurated, things like streamlining policy right across all SOEs will be one of the issues. On governance matters, on financial reporting, on ethics and all that, that will be properly streamlined. But you also want to know if there's a long-term plan on the 800 SOEs. Are we going to sell some? Are we going to keep them all and all that? We are in the process of reviewing that, and the SOE Council will be able to give counsel on things like that. The ideal position that I would like to see us get to is almost the Singaporean position, where they have their state-owned enterprise holding entity, which is called Temasek. and they run their various businesses, and they've got various sectors, and they run it with a great deal of independence. They run it effectively for the benefit of the sovereign. And that is the nirvana that I would really like to see us get to, where you've got your ministries running your policy processes, and you've got an entity that will be running through the various sectors, subsectors of the economy, be running those businesses on behalf of the people of South Africa. And where there will be less interference, there will be more independence, and where you will have really focused, business-like people who will be knowing what the mandate is, a developmental mandate as well as a commercial mandate, and that can fit various SOEs on a differentiated basis. And that is precisely what I'd like to see happening. We need a strong competition law, and I could not agree more. Now, I was surprised to see in the media the other day where there was criticism of even Minister Patel, that he is beating this competition horse. And people were suggesting that a small economy, we don't need too much competition. And now that goes against what the IMF and the World Bank have said about our economy. They have said that our economy, the structure of our economy is so flawed in that too few companies have a stranglehold on our economy. It does not allow space for newcomers, small and medium enterprises to have room to operate and to do business. And this call that we're just too small of a country to have too much competition, in my view, is a fallacy. Because if we are going to have a good economy, we must have competition. And if you don't have competition, all you have is stagnation, no technological advancement, prices can skyrocket, and it can lead to the exploitation of the consumers. So we need competition in South Africa. Repeat, we need competition here in this country. And I want to move to the end because I've been talking too long. Infrastructure development is an important aspect, and we would like to hear more and more proposals on funding. We need, yes, policy stability in this regard as well, and to bring together as many professionals as possible into this space so that we are in the end able to have a very strong infrastructure developmental thrust. We've said that we're going to set up an infrastructure fund. They're finalizing it. It has taken a bit too long as far as I'm concerned, and this talks to the lack of full capability in the state. I spoke about this 2 years ago, and I want to see cranes. I want to see yellow equipment throughout the country, really getting the infrastructure play that we want to see happening in our country. The other issues that have been raised have to do the critical sectors of economic growth, and I agree. Agriculture is an important sector. I spoke about it on the land issue. We obviously need to make sure that there's market access, there's skills, and we must encourage more and more inclusive business models, the infrastructure, but more importantly, finance is an important aspect of this whole process if we are going to get particularly black people to participate more in the economy, in farming. Farming methodologies need to be also upscaled. SMMEs, we need to encourage more SMMEs, and in tourism, safety obviously is one of the key issues. And this is where the private sector can work with us, President. If we can get private sector to work with us to ensure that we create as many safe areas in our country as possible, and obviously working together with government. Removing the barriers to entry, is a critical issue which I have already spoken about. And on skills, we need to access more technology. We also need to get businesses to create training institutes. And government must be supportive. It must have regulations that can support that. But in the business side as well, the coaching and mentoring is very, very critical. We need to see businesses training more and more of their people. But the most important part for me is we need to see businesses going to universities, going to our TVET colleges with unsolicited proposals on the types of skills that industry needs. The universities and TVET colleges must not be operating like islands in isolation, because they are the ones who are preparing the skills that you need as business people. And I'd like to see more of a symbiotic relationship between our institutions of learning as well as businesses and business organizations. I haven't been seeing much of that, to a point where I've been calling for businesses to adopt TVET colleges, be close to TVET colleges, even if it's a few businesses adopting certain disciplines in TVET colleges, working closely with them. I'd like to see more and more of that. I've been making calls in this regard, and I'd like you to draft that aspect of the State of the Nation address where you agree that you are going to do it. On the fourth industrial revolution, I could not agree more that we should focus on the future of work. Adoption of technology, and the education system must be responsive, and lifelong learning is one of the more important areas that needs to be focused on. Now, I participated in the International Labour Organization study on the future of work with the Prime Minister of Sweden, and we came up with a report on future of work and how the whole world needs to approach the future of work in the light of globalization, climate change, as well as digital technological advancement. The labor laws has been raised, and I don't know what the problem is with the labor laws. And I would, as businesses, that you should raise the challenges that the labor laws give you so that we can understand what it is you talk about. I often hear that our labor policies are not conducive to running businesses, and I am yet to hear anyone come up with a cogent piece of legislation which they believe is a difficult one for businesses. The national minimum wage is in place, which I was asked to shepherd through Parliament, and there are exemptions to that for those businesses that are not able to comply. In the end, the skills revolution is something that the private sector can play a critical and a big role in. And we would like to see the private sector playing a big role in the skills revolution. In fact, you should be leading the charge. You should be ensuring that as many young people as possible are trained, and that learning on a lifelong basis takes place. And lastly, the startups ecosystem. We are a country that needs to be encouraging more and more entrepreneurs. Date Richard Maponya played his role in encouraging small and medium enterprises and created his own small ecosystem of startups. And I believe that all of us can play a critical role in encouraging startups and supporting small and medium enterprises. Yes, buying local. I met one business person on a walk when I was on holiday in Cape Town. He's a furniture maker. And he says, "President, I employ 1,000 people. And they've been working with me and for me for many, many years, 30 years. We're now facing the specter of having to retrench some of those people because we have huge corporations," and he named some of the corporations, that are buying the furniture that we make here in South Africa. They are buying it in the United States and they are buying it in Europe. And he was saying to me, is there a way in which support can be given to local furniture makers, for office furniture for that matter? Because it isn't pleasing to us, as we employ so many people, to see that our companies are buying office furniture in other countries. That speaks to localization. That speaks to buying South African. And I think if we can be like other countries that are so proud to produce their own goods and buy them locally, I think we can go a great deal further. The Job Summit addressed this issue, and the unions are actually continuously saying, let us up the ante when it comes to this. Let us get more and more of South African entities, both government and business, to buy local, to buy goods that are made by South Africans. And I believe if we can do that, our economy will begin also to grow. With that, colleagues, I'd like to thank you for having drafted a few pages of the State of the Nation address, and that I regard that as the first draft. And usually when we draft the SONA speech, we go up to 20, draft number 20. So I want to see a few more drafts coming forward. But I want to thank you for coming up with the concept, activating actual outcomes. What I can promise you is that we will be focusing more and more on strengthening the capability of the state, and execution and implementation, 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 and implementation. With your assistance, I am sure we will be able to succeed. Thank you very much. I took long.
A very, very big thank you and congratulations, Your Excellency, on version 1 and the dry run in 1. Thank you very much. A round of applause for the President, please. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just heard is a reminder of the words